Good evening, everyone. Welcome. My name is Alan Donsky, and it's a pleasure to welcome you here this evening. This is one of the first sessions we've had without the support of the Calgary Library, which we've wonderfully had for the last couple of years. So we're still learning how to juggle all these pieces smoothly. Welcome on behalf of Wellness Through Mindfulness, which is a group of dedicated mindfulness and meditation practitioners who got together about 5-6 years ago to bring mindfulness, meditation, and related topics to the general public in a way that is particularly secular and very specific. We have a website at www.wtmthebreathproject.org, which lists all our upcoming events, speaker notes, and recordings of all previous sessions. As always, we want to, in the spirit of truth, reconciliation, and peace, we want to acknowledge the traditional territories of the people of Treaty 7 in southern Alberta, including all those nations that constitute the Blackfoot Confederacy, the Tsuut'ina Nation, and Stoney Nakoda. We also recognize that the city of Calgary is home to the Métis Nation of Alberta, Region 3, and that we welcome all of us on this earth and those of us who are fortunate to live in such a beautiful place. We put up a disclaimer starting a few months ago, just in the interest of everyone concerned, that just to recognize that although some of us are professionals who work with people on a more personal level as either counselors or therapists or a range of different healers, this forum is really not designed to respond to particular specific questions. We, of course, welcome conversation and comments and questions that are related to the topic of the evening. And we highly recommend, if people are feeling that they really have deeper issues to explore, that they seek an appropriate professional. A reminder, just a little plea. We used to meet in person at a hall and ask people to donate a small amount as they're comfortable with. To keep the website going, we do have a person who supports us that we need to pay. It is a voluntary group, and any small donation is much appreciated. As little as even a few dollars keeps us going and able to keep up the website. None of the speakers or the organizing folk are paid in any way. We always want to promote upcoming talks. We have wonderful talks coming up in 2 weeks' time, which would be the third Thursday of this month. We meet on the first and third Thursdays. Tools and Tips for Deep Restful Sleep, led by Heather Good, who I see Heather is with us this evening as part of the group and participating, and really helping with a good night's sleep. And Heather is an experienced hypnosis and yoga teacher, also has a background in social work, and is a really wonderful teacher and spiritual guide. 2 weeks after that, Thursday, November the 3rd, Leslie Ellistat. For those of you who are regulars, know Leslie as well. Mindfulness of Spaciousness. And in a sense, to recognize that as we become more intimate with our own experiences, we can find a sense of ease and connecting to something more than our narrow view of ourselves. And there's an inner spaciousness which we can connect to, and then also a greater peace and spaciousness outside of ourselves. Introducing this evening's speaker, those of you who are new, you may or may not have heard, but of course, a great colleague, a friend, a teacher, Phil Blustein, who is a retired gastroenterologist, had a career working with people who had gastrointestinal problems, and discovered along the way that a lot of his patients required and benefited from really an understanding of the role of stress in their lives. And Phil has been a practitioner who was part of the founding group. He has his own website called www.thebreathproject. And at Phil's website, he also has a download of his book called Mindfulness Medication, a physician's prescription for stress relief. And also on Phil's website are a number of wonderful links, videos, talks by lots of different teachers. So if you are a beginner or you have some experience, Phil's website is a great resource for us. Phil will be chatting to us till about 8 o'clock or so. We then have a chance for discussion. There are two ways to participate in that. You are free to put your hand up if you wish to ask a question live. The session is being recorded, but you can choose to just participate by asking a question in the chat room if you prefer to do it that way. And I will be the moderator for that session, the interactive part of this evening from 8 to 8:30. Although we are wrapping up at 8:30, Phil and I are more than happy to stay on if there are some further questions after that. Phil will be chatting with us tonight about the most common question that often comes up for people who are new, or even people who are on the path, who have a practice of meditation or mindfulness. And what is the best meditation for you? Because sometimes we may get excited about something in our first few months or years, and we find it gets a little stale. We want to refresh ourselves or something. So Phil's really exploring this evening what some of the different techniques might be. Not all meditation or mindfulness is the same. What's focused attention, what's open monitoring, open awareness, etc. So we're all excited to have Phil tonight presenting on a very common and topic of interest, and I'll let you carry on, Phil.
Thanks, Alan. It's a great pleasure to be with you tonight, and I want to thank everyone who is joining us. You know, every time I give one of these talks, it's a wonderful opportunity to more deeply investigate the topic, learn more, learn from our moderator and our discussion, and importantly, learn from the participants in this evening. So as the evening goes along, if there are questions that you have about meditation or mindfulness and your practice, then please enter that question into the chat at any time. So my meditation has been around for thousands of years, and you may have heard of it in terms of Tibetan, Vipassana, yogic, transcendental. So there are multiple types of meditation. From a Buddhist perspective, meditation comes from the Pali word bhavana. So bhavana means to cultivate. Cultivate what? The mind. For what purpose? Purification of the mind. And what does that ultimately mean? That means a mind that is free of greed, hatred, and delusion. All of us experience the fact that whatever we have, we're never happy with. It's either something we have that we want more of, or something that we don't like that we want to get rid of. What I'd like to talk about today is more of a general approach to meditation, rather than looking at the specific categories of yogic or Theravadian or transcendental. And in a broad scheme, one can address meditation in terms of, is it concentration or is it Vipassana meditation? And what I mean by that is, when we're concentrated, we are choosing a specific object to focus our awareness on. It could be a breath, a mantra, a sound. Well, Vipassana is looking at the nature of experience. What is present? Does it talk to us about impermanence, suffering, and conditionality? So to start the evening off, I would like to get a sense of how people meditate. Is it from a concentration or a Vipassana mode? So I'd like you to go to the chat, and could you please enter into the chat either the letter C for concentration, focus on one object, or Vipassana. Are you meditating to see the true nature of reality? And if you enter into concentration, could you also enter what's the object that you use to meditate on? So I invite you to go to the website, and this will just give us a better understanding of where we're starting from, maybe what the emphasis needs to be. Enter C for concentration or V for Vipassana. So what we're seeing here, interestingly, okay, here we're seeing it now. So what we see is that I think the majority of people are concentration. And there certainly is about maybe 40% that are Vipassana. And I think the interesting aspect, and maybe this is a question that I didn't ask that would be helpful, is how experienced of a meditator are you? And that I would think that the majority of people who are C are people who are probably new or not as experienced. And perhaps we see that the V's might be people who've had a long-standing meditation practice. So let's now go to concentration. And in concentration, what we're talking about is focusing on an object in order to unify the mind. In a generalization, this can be broken down into either focused awareness or open monitoring. When I talk about focused awareness, I'm saying that there is an intentional and sustained awareness of a chosen object. Now, this could be the breath, a mantra, which is our words, sounds, visualization, body sensation, or sound. Anapanasati was one of the earliest Buddhist forms of meditation, and it actually was mindfulness of breathing. Concentration meditation is a very effective way to cultivate awareness of the present moment. And with that concentration of mind and unification, it tremendously helps in decreasing emotional reactivity. Often people choose the breath, and the breath really is an ideal object for focused awareness. It's always there, hopefully, because if it isn't, you got a bigger problem than meditation. It's spontaneous and it's non-conceptual. In other words, there isn't a lot that's created. It's not charged. It's not energized, unlike a thought or an emotion that rises in your consciousness. I believe that meditation does you. In other words, we put the effort in, we practice, and then there are changes that occur in the way in which our mind works that spontaneously impact the way we then function in this world. Modern brain imaging has demonstrated that when you meditate on a regular basis, there are definite positive changes that occur that allow for this impact of the practice doing you. That there is an increase in the executive functioning of our brain. And that's called the prefrontal cortex. That's responsible for regulation, emotionally, regulation of self, and enhanced memory. And conversely, the amygdala, which is the center of fear, of emotional reactivity, decreases. The other interesting aspect is that when we are focused on something, that there is a decrease in the default mode network. When we're sort of aimlessly walking around and just not thinking about anything, what happens is we resort to the default mode network, which causes increase in selfing. We constantly ruminate and think about the self and how we are in relationship to what is present, and we plan and we criticize. So meditation is very effective in dampening down this default mode network that allows us to be present without constantly thinking about us. Focused awareness, or focusing on a single object, is not just all about awareness. It's very interesting that there are various components to this attitude of awareness that are part of focused awareness. Initially, there is this intentional selection of the object of choice. There is this attempt to have sustained and ongoing awareness. But you know what's going to happen. You're never going to stay on the breath indefinitely. There's always going to be this capacity to be drawn away in a distracted way. And so what happens is that this attentional processing monitors what is happening. Are we still on the breath, or have we been drawn away from it? Very, very important part of it. Then we need to have what's called disengagement. Often we get really caught up and identified with what's going on. And we need to be able to step back from the ownership of what we are experiencing. We need to disengage. And finally, we then need to refocus back on the breath. So awareness of concentration involves multiple aspects: intentional and sustained awareness, monitoring, disentanglement, and refocusing. Initially, there's a lot of effort that goes into sustained awareness. We're really directing in an efforting way our mind to stay on one thing. And that's actually quite difficult. But the good news is that over time, this becomes much easier and much more facile at what we do. So why don't we see what the practice of focus awareness is all about? And that's by doing it. So I would invite everybody now to sit back in their chair, feet flat on the floor, legs not crossed. Spine is upright but relaxed. Your back of your spine is not leaning against the back of the chair. It's upright and away from it. Your head is straight, looking down slightly, the chin pulled back, and the eyes are closed. In some situations, it's recommended that the eyes be open, but I think it really helps to decrease that visual stimulation. To start the practice, I'd like you to take 3 deep breaths in and out as a way to just settle you in this moment and bring you to this moment. So one of the big problems we have with focused awareness concentration is that our minds wander. And so what I'm going to outline during this guided meditation initially are strategies to maintain sustained awareness of the present moment. It's often said that one should choose a spot in the body where one feels the breath dominantly. This could be the tip of the nostrils, the chest, the abdomen, the whole body. I would invite you to, for this meditation, to choose the area at the tip of the nostrils. Now, this is a very focal and sensitive spot that really helps to anchor your awareness into one spot. Initially, in order to identify that spot, I would invite you to take 3 quick, deep breaths in and out. And just notice, where do you feel the sensations of the breath when you do that? And that is now going to be the anchor, the focus on which you bring your awareness to. What we're bringing our awareness to is the feeling of the physical sensations of the movement of the breath at the tip of the nostrils. Is the breath short, long, smooth, irregular, warm, cool, moist, or dry, quiet or loud? The reality is that no breath is the same as the next breath, and that every breath will have different physical sensation to it. By anchoring our awareness onto the unique aspect of the physical sensation, this is very powerful in anchoring our awareness to the breath. The breath is not just one complete cycle. One could try and follow it that way, but it may be easier to try and follow the breath in two segments. If you examine your breath carefully, you'll notice that there is an inhalation, a short pause, an exhalation, and a longer pause. It may be easier to meditate in a focused, sustained way by bringing awareness from the beginning of the inhalation to the end of the short pause, and from the beginning of the exhalation to the end of the long pause. Breaking your awareness up into these two segments allows for one to be able to follow the breath more easily. The next tip to try and sustain awareness is to try and deliberately focus your awareness on the longer pause at the end of exhalation. You're not trying to change it. You're not trying to modify it. You're just bringing a more sustained and defined awareness to that area. When you're in a pause, nothing's happening. And when nothing is happening, your brain will then resort back to its default mode. So what you need to do is you need to create some sort of interest in that pause to try and sustain awareness in a continuous fashion. And all you're really trying to do is to see, here's the pause. What is the pause? Stillness is not nothingness. By deliberately focusing on the pause at the end of the exhalation is a great way to sustain awareness in a continuous fashion. We breathe spontaneously. Thank goodness. Imagine if we had to try and remind ourselves to breathe, we wouldn't be here. So the bottom line is, don't try and control your breathing. Allow your body to breathe spontaneously. Sustained awareness can also be supported by identifying the in-breath and the out-breath. So when you're taking the breath in from the beginning of inhalation to the end of the short pause, say in. And when you're breathing out from the beginning of exhalation to the end of the longer pause, say out. Anchoring the awareness with the words of in and out is a great way to help support sustained awareness. And counting can also be a valuable tool. Again, we're anchoring two things together to try and support sustained awareness. When you breathe, count 1 at the end of the first exhalation. When you breathe again, count 2 at the end of the next exhalation. And continue to do this until you reach 10, and then you start all over again. So why don't you try counting, just see how it feels. Another way to count is to count 1 at the end of the first inhalation and 2 at the end of the first exhalation. Then 2 with the next inhalation and 3 at the next inhalation and 4 at the end of the next exhalation. And continue to do that back and forth until you get to 10, and then start again. And the last counting technique is to count the in-breath and the out-breath. So as long as it takes for you to do an in-breath, count 1, 2, 3, 4. And then when you start to exhale, count again. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. So these are all valuable techniques to try and sustain focus awareness on the object of choice, which in this situation is the breath. The other problem that we encounter often when we meditate is we start to get drowsy, we start to get sleepy. I've done a lot of vertical sleeping in the name of meditation. So how do you deal with when you get sleepy? Well, often what happens as we get drowsy is that our spine starts to collapse and we start to move forward. So bringing your awareness to the spine and trying to maintain an upright but relaxed posture is a great way to energize what you're doing. If needed, open your eyes up to allow more visual stimulation. Maybe you need to stand rather than sit. Or maybe you just need to go to sleep. If boredom is a problem, as we talked about before, we're bringing awareness to the breath that is constantly changing. Can you then increase your curiosity about the unique physical aspect of each breath? And finally, we're all faced with the problem of physical pain. We're just not used to sitting. And so our normal instinctive urge when we have pain is to try and move our bodies. So it can be very helpful to try and just pause, to bring your awareness to what the pain feels like in your body. What is that sensation? And to bring awareness to the urge to move, the urge to avoid what is present. Meditation is not asking you to be a warrior and survive pain and never move. It's asking you to bring awareness to the pain. And so finding when the pain is, okay, I've had enough, I want to move. Begin to bring awareness to the intentionality of wanting to move, of the various ways in which you move to assume a new posture, and what it feels like when you've moved and there's a sense of relief. So open your eyes up and we'll come back to the next component of concentration and awareness called open monitoring. As you remember, focused awareness was awareness on a chosen single object. Open awareness or open monitoring is awareness of whatever object comes into your consciousness. It is not something that is chosen by you consciously. It's something that your body has awareness of. Focused awareness is never just focused awareness, because as we know, there are always distractions that come into our awareness. And so one can see that one can have a sustained awareness, but then we're drawn off to a thought, to an emotion, to a physical sensation. And it's at that point that open monitoring kicks in, awareness of what was not chosen. So we actually call this a hybrid version that sort of rests between sustained awareness of a chosen object and open monitoring of an object that was not chosen for you. And this is just the normal process of how we meditate on the breath and bring awareness to whenever we are constantly pulled away from the breath. We then evolve into what is called true open monitoring, the capacity to be aware non-reactively to whatever arises in our consciousness. This is more difficult than focused awareness because now one is faced with the full gamut of one's emotional and cognitive and physical landscape. All those thoughts and emotions and painful feelings are now arising into your consciousness. This is very charged and it's very energized, but on the other hand, it's very revealing to what we are encountering on a moment-to-moment basis. Focused awareness, interestingly, is awareness of a single object that is constantly changing. Open monitoring is awareness of constantly changing objects. So really you can see that the common theme between the two is the element of changeability. Open monitoring can be supported by what is called noting, labeling. In other words, one is bringing awareness and labeling what one is aware of. So in a general sense, it can be thinking, feeling, sensing. That's all. Helps to anchor your awareness to what is present. It helps to give you what is called meta-awareness, to know what you know. Too often we are totally lost in our thought. And what happens is that we are just angry, but don't know that we are angry. One can even become more specific and say judging, planning, sadness, cramping. But notice is a very valuable asset to the open monitoring process as a way to sustain and to keep aware of what you are doing. Just as there were multiple components to the attentional processing of focused awareness, this also applies to open monitoring. This is an intentional process. You are directing your mind to bring awareness to an object. It may not necessarily be the same, but it is intentional awareness of an object. There's no sustained intentionality in open monitoring. But monitoring of what is going on is a key component. You need to be very flexible. You need to be like that butterfly that keeps flitting from flower to flower in order to know what is present. And again, if you become identified with, you need to disengage, and then you need to refocus, bring your awareness back to what arises on a moment-to-moment basis. I find open monitoring quite delightful. personally. I find that with the sustained awareness, there's a lot of efforting initially. And with open monitoring, there's this capacity to step back and simply rest in this passive receptivity of whatever arises in the moment. So, the only way to really get a feel of what this open monitoring is to practice. So I would invite you now to sit up in your chair, close your eyes, and bring awareness to the physical sensations of the movement of the breath at the tip of your nostrils. We're going to start with focused awareness. What do you feel? Bring awareness to the movement of the breath at the tip of the nostrils. Inevitably, you will be distracted. You will lose that sustained awareness. And at that moment that you become aware that you have been drawn off your breath, label what's present, thinking, feeling, and then refocus yourself back to the breath. And what you've just done is the hybrid practice that rests between sustained awareness and open monitoring. And now I would invite you to let go of the breath and rest in the awareness of whatever arises spontaneously. You're not choosing the object. The object has been chosen for you by the attentional processing of your mind. It's choosing what it wants to be aware of. And you're just bringing awareness to what has been chosen for you. And as you become aware of these constantly changing objects, just label them, either in a general sense of thinking, feeling, sensing, or more specifically, judging, sadness, cramping. So just rest in the awareness of whatever presents itself to you and label the experience. So let's bring this practice now to a close and move on to the Vipassana or insight form of meditation. The Pali word Vipassana is commonly translated as insight or seeing clearly. Seeing what clearly? The true nature of reality. How we construct and create our reality on a moment-to-moment basis. And this truly speaks to mindfulness. The origin of Vipassana mindfulness was introduced by the Buddha in his teachings on the four foundations of mindfulness. And what the Buddha asked us to be aware of was the breath in the body, feeling, not emotions. This is called Vedana, or the feeling tone of what is present. Does it instinctively feel pleasant, unpleasant, or neutral? The mind, and is what is present skillful or unskillful? And finally, mindfulness of the teachings of the Buddha that might have included the Four Noble Truths or the Eightfold Path. And what was also important about the four foundations of mindfulness was your approach to them. That there was this importance to be aware, to recognize that things don't last, that they are impermanent. To be aware of what is called bare attention, to know things as they present without superimposed conceptualization. And very importantly, no clinging to what is present, the desire always to change our reality. There is no question that in historic Buddhism, to discern, to judge whether something was skillful or not, was an important component. And it was very important to act in a skillful way, ethically, morally. And in its ultimate sense, mindfulness was meant for what was called nirvana, liberation from suffering. Historically, it was felt that one needed to be very concentrated before one would go into insight meditation. And there were deep concentrated states or jhanas that were necessary as a prerequisite before one would do insight, that there needed to be this real calming, this ending of thinking, this equanimity, before one could truly see this true nature of reality. But let's be clear about meditation historically. This was meant for the monks and the nuns who lived in the monasteries. Meditation was not performed by the general public. Their practice consisted of rituals, offerings, and ethical behavior, not as a means to achieve enlightenment, but to achieve a better rebirth. Historically, it's very interesting. What we consider as current Vipassana or insight meditation arose because the British colonized historic Burma in 1885. The nobility was banished, ended. And the nobility was very important in Buddhist times because they supported the monks, the monasteries, and they supported Buddhism in society. There was a great fear when the British colonized Burma that Buddhism was going to be lost. So the Burmese monks made a dedicated effort to bring Buddhism, to bring mindfulness, and to bring insight to the public. And they created what was called a dry insight. In other words, it did not require deep, concentrated states to enter into. So all you needed was not sustained concentration, but just momentary concentration, the capacity to be aware moment to moment. There was a Burmese monk named Mahasi Sayadaw, and he was very instrumental in impacting the early American Buddhist Jack Kornfield, Joseph Goldstein, and their understanding and what they brought back to America as it related to mindfulness. Mahasi Sayadaw was asking one to be aware moment to moment of any sensation that arose and to bring contemplation to it. What do I mean by contemplation? That there was an attempt to see that existence was conditional, that it arose dependent upon what were the conditions that were present in the moment, that any attempt to hold on to your experience led to suffering. And inevitably, everything was impermanent. Mahasi Sayadaw's approach to Vipassana or insight mindfulness was a combination of this awareness, moment to moment, and the noting, the labeling of experience, but labeling not to make you just aware, but again, to see ultimately that the sense of self was temporary, ephemeral, conditioned, and to cling to it would only cause suffering. Contemporary mindfulness was significantly influenced in 1979. John Kabat-Zinn created mindfulness-based stress reduction. This was a secularized form of mindfulness as an attempt to deal with patients who had chronic pain that failed all other modalities. He described mindfulness as awareness of the present moment on purpose in a particular way, non-judgmentally. And this definition has significantly influenced our modern understanding of mindfulness. The crux of the definition is non-judgmentally. What does that mean? On a face value, it might be don't judge at all, or don't judge critically. However, it's very interesting is that when you look at John Kabat-Zinn's description in earlier literature about what he meant as non-judgmentally, I think is a little different than what we appreciate today. He really meant non-duality. Well, what in the world does that mean? There's no separation of subject and object. Well, what does that mean? Non-conceptual knowing, non-judgmental, non-preferential. John Kabat-Zinn had a very strong Korean Zen Buddhist practice. And there was this belief in pure awareness of the original mind prior to the thinking mind. Is that the way you look at non-judgmentally? Let's be clear. Buddhism, like mindfulness, is not monolithic. It is not one set way it should be. Every time Buddhism came into contact with a different culture, that culture either adopted or adapted the teachings of Buddhism. Buddhism was always in flux. So, although John Kabat-Zinn's definition of mindfulness is quite different than the early historic, critical, judgmental, discerning aspects of mindfulness, that doesn't mean it's right or wrong. I think the important thing is that you need to be aware for yourself. What definition do you want to have for mindfulness? And I clearly see it as a skillful relationship with the present moment that allows for a skillful ethical action. So, why don't we practice what Vipassana or insight meditation is? And I would again invite you to sit up in your chair, close your eyes, and bring your awareness to the physical sensation of the movement of the breath at the tip of the nostrils. We're going to start off and anchor ourselves in focused awareness. And then I want you to evolve to open monitoring awareness. No specific anchor, but awareness to whatever arises in the present moment and labeling what that experience is. And now let's see if we can attempt Vipassana or insight meditation. So when something arises, a bit of a thought or emotion or physical sensation that has some energy to it, remember, did I create this, or is this just something that is arising conditionally? Does it come to an end? And if I grab onto it, will I be unhappy in doing that? So let's start off with that baseline of just understanding what are the aspects of the true nature of reality that will be revealed in each moment. And now can we have the capacity to be able to experientially feel these truths of reality as they are revealed moment to moment. Something comes into our consciousness spontaneously. Can you simply be open to what does it feel like to have this new construct, something that you didn't think, it just has arisen in this moment? And watch it as it then just disappears into nothingness. There is that capacity to directly feel a rising and passing away of phenomena. And if it's something that you like, that you're losing, or something that you have that you don't want, what does that feel like? What we're trying to cultivate is, how does it feel experientially? How do these truths of reality feel as you simply bring awareness, feeling of the body, moment to moment? Do you have the capacity to rest in this uncontrollable, constant flux of experience? To be with this arising and passing away, moment to moment, of all phenomena. This truly is the essence of meditation. This is truly the essence of mindfulness. It is that capacity to see the truth of reality, the impermanence, the conditionality, the suffering if you grab onto it, without any view of desire or aversion. So we're going to bring this meditation to a close. So there is choice available when one meditates. In a generalized sense, it's either concentration through focused awareness or open monitoring, or Vipassana or insight meditation. The reality is that these probably don't exist independently. That it certainly is very beneficial to have a mind that is settled and not reactive in order to see into the truth of reality. And that when one does have this settling of reality, this insight, that helps to support concentration. So what do you start with? Well, I think for many of us, I think it might be easier initially for us to start with concentration of the focused awareness variety. Can we simply bring awareness to a single object, our breath, in an attempt to calm and steady our mind that plays out in how reactive we are in our daily life? As one feels more comfortable, one can transition to open monitoring. That gives you a greater sense of the emotional and psychological and physical landscape, and see how you can be with it in a non-reactive way. I have a feeling that many individuals who are more experienced are willing to attempt the Vipassana meditation. But that doesn't necessarily mean that's what's right for you. You've tried the 3 different ways. What resonates most for you? That's key. And there is this understanding that you may start your meditation in that sitting, focused, concentrated, and then as time goes on in that sitting, maybe shift to open monitoring or Vipassana. Or maybe your practice is one of just concentration over a long period of time. And then there's this feeling of, maybe I'm ready to switch it up to something else. When I started my meditation, I was very much into focused awareness. And to be quite honest, in reality, when I look back at that, I think I was going against my natural grain of what really resonated with me. And when I finally got out of focused awareness into open monitoring, that really resonated with me. And even sort of bringing it back to the point of just resting in awareness of what knew the experience, to simply rest in that receptivity, that openness of what came about. It felt effortless for me. My practice of Vipassana is all day long. I try and bring insight to all my experiences that have some degree of charge to them. When I'm sitting on the pillow and doing my formal meditation, I bring Vipassana to again what is charged. So I would say that you've experienced or hopefully had a taste of the different aspects of meditation. Try them. What works for you? Be flexible, be fearless, and you will find something that is tremendously rewarding. I'll close with a personal observation. When I started my meditation practice, it was done to help my stress and my anxiety, my type A plus personality. And you know what? It was great. It was wonderful. But I think I received a gift from my meditation and mindfulness practice that I did not have any intention in getting. And what I noticed after a long practice over the years, but there was this much greater sense of compassion and empathy for myself and other. And so I strongly encourage you to meditate and be open to the gift that you will receive that you are not even aware of. And clearly ask yourself the question, why do you meditate? Why are you mindful? Is it to increase your attention? Is it a therapeutic strategy to relieve stress? Is it to act skillfully with ethical and moral behavior? Or is it for a transcendence of this conditioned sense of self and ultimately resting from time to time in a presence that is one of intuitive wisdom and compassion? I wish you all well on your meditative path. And with that, I'd like to invite Alan back. And this is the time where we are going to go into question and answer. And Alan, while we're waiting for some questions, maybe I might pose this question to you. What's your type of meditation? And what benefit have you personally felt from it?
I started off with the focus concentration, which in its purest form is about really just generally becoming fit, focusing, the capacity to just refocus the mind, those 4 steps you said, Phil, to become aware, noticing the mind going off, setting the intention, come back. That practice, I think, is why a lot of beginners start there. Then once you've got some familiarity with that level of fitness, now you can become a little more, and I became a little more focused. So what is the relevance? So what if I can train what are the benefits of this attentional fitness? Well, to start to look at my mind. And given the nature of my work as a therapist, of course, I'm always interested in my mind and the minds of those people who I'm honored to meet, who share their inner world with me. So it was to look at the nature of mind and the nature of reality. So that brought me then into looking into further insight. What are the patterns that we all have? What are the patterns I have in my thinking? And of course, all of this, and you touched on it twice tonight, Phil, you spoke about wisdom. You also spoke about the Eightfold Path, that ultimately what we all want is an improved quality of life. And for some people, that will be reduction of stress or suffering. For some people, it will be a transcendent connection to the wider being or to nature. For some people, it will be quality of their relationships. For some people, it will be to help to heal trauma. And those 3 capacities work together, the 3 groupings within the Eightfold Path. For me, I found that very useful. The ethical, which is right thinking, right intention, then right speech, right livelihood, right action, and then concentration and mindfulness and effort. And that's really what it's all about, because there isn't anyone who's not at some level wanting to be wiser, more ethical, and be able to navigate more effectively the lives that we lead. So really, ultimately, it's about quality of life. And I found the benefits, both personally and professionally, just to be huge. I find myself going back and forth at different times. And I'll make a comment, and then please, if other people want to speak up or type comments in the chat room, what happens in the body, which is really interesting, is that when we drop the thinking and we become focused and we focus on the breath or focus on the heart or focus on the belly, whatever, that is non-conceptual. We're not thinking. And it's like the metaphor of shifting attention to where you want it to be. And the moment we shifted away from thinking, the stories, the attachment, the judgments, the what ifs, the worrying about the future, regretting the past, the moment we shift to an experience, all that thinking actually sort of slows down. We get away from that. And that slowing down causes us to relax. And that relaxation through the vagal system is why we actually get tired. So I was in a high school once teaching a group of young kids, and the one kid said, hey, Dr. D, I noticed I got really tired during that sit. Do you think I can use this to help me fall asleep at bedtime? And I said to him, perfect, because these are the conditions in which you want to be relaxed so that you can fall into the sleep. So meditation is much, much more, as you've said, Phil, than just relaxing and getting tired. And in fact, the tiredness is a measure of how much we relax, because that's the very precondition you want to be able to fall asleep. Of course, not in the middle of a meditation. So I really liked, and then with that, dropping in the stillness. And I don't see any questions or anything. I'll carry on. I'll just mention a couple of other things, how this relates. When it gets still, that stillness is just a delight, because we can start to listen to other parts of our being. We're human beings. And those other parts are generally quieter. You've mentioned them, Phil, tonight. Compassion, wisdom, forgiveness, love, kindness, generosity, curiosity, an open mind, unknowing and not knowing. My mind, and I believe many other people's, when my mind's going, it's loud, it's directional, it wants to make its point, it wants to argue with itself, it wants to prove its right thinking, etc. The heart and all these other parts of us that make us human, they speak in a much quieter language, and we can only hear them in that stillness, in that quietness. And you said it beautifully, Phil, stillness is not nothing. In fact, there's so much in there. And we live in a society that's very noisy. We fill every moment. So that capacity to really just be present, not just for the sake of tuning out, but actually tuning into something different. We're tuning into a part of ourselves, our humanity. And however you want to frame that, and the Buddhists frame it as wisdom and action and concentration and effort and ethics. And that's really what it's all about. So for me, mindfulness is in the service of something else. It's not a thing in itself. It's useful to be more relaxed. I summarize, I've just put it in the room, flexible and fearless, and make it fun. I put in a third F there, Phil. So the gifts show themselves, the wisdom and compassion. There's a comment in the room.
There's a question, Alan, from Len.
Okay, yeah.
I find in my focused meditation that my understanding of sounds around me does increase. Does that make sense at all? Len, would you mind quickly adding, what do you mean understanding of sounds? Does that mean you hear them more intensely, or there's a melodic component to them? Or could you just clarify for me what you mean by understanding of sounds?
Awareness.
Yeah. So that's really good, because they say we have 60,000 thoughts a day. And sometimes when you meditate, it feels like 60,000 thoughts are just sitting there in your meditation. And that, our minds were so busy that we have no opportunity to hear and see and taste and touch and smell anything else. And I think that when we finally meditate, one of the functions of meditation is this sense of calmness and unity of mind that allows one to see more clearly. And so I think this is a beautiful example, then, of what you're describing, is the fact that because you're eliminating all that chatter, you can hear what you want to hear, and you hear what is there. So I think that's a beautiful description, Len, of the process of meditation. And just to demonstrate how obsessed we are with technology and to always be stimulated. They did this experiment. They took these people, and I think a lot of them were younger, and they put them into a room individually, and they said, okay, Alan, I'm going to have your cell phone, and you're going to have your Apple Watch. I'm going to have your notebook. I'm going to have your pen. And you have to sit there for an hour. And that's all you're left with. Now, if you get too bored, you have the capacity to turn this switch on and self-administer an electric shock. Over 40% of the males took the electric shock just to keep them stimulated. And a certain percentage of the women as well, more so with the men. And so it's just amazing in our society, this constantly need to be stimulated. So I think that's a very perfect example that you give, Len, of the fact that with this settling of the mind. And I find for myself, the other aspect is the creativity part that comes, that when I am trying to write and I sit down and meditate, all of a sudden these insights and these understandings and where I'm going to go start to surface, because they're no longer suppressed or hidden by this constant thinking. So thank you for your question, Len. That really spurred some useful conversation. Anything else you want to add, Alan, to that?
Yeah, I'm looking at the comment you added there, Len, about you actually quite enjoy it. And this is part of the benefits, that when we're actually slow things down and attend to things in a bit more depth, we actually stop and smell the roses. We literally begin to enjoy life more. We're actually more engaged with it. So that's why walking slowly, we can actually enjoy the act of walking. We do mindful eating, so that we're actually aware of the smells and the textures, eating the raisin exercise. That life actually becomes richer and deeper, because we actually see and experience what's actually happening in the moment. Don's offering a comment. I'll let you read that aloud if you want to, Phil. Go ahead.
No, you can read it out and then we can talk about it.
We rest in receptivity, wonderful wisdom. So resetting, movement into more and more ventral state is my great attractor these days. And this presentation does that for me. Now, I think, if I get this wrong, Don, let me know, please. I mentioned the vagus system. There's a ventral part of the vagal system and the dorsal part. And the one part is related to attraction, and the other part is related to pushing away, because we're always, and this is where that judgment came from that Phil mentioned, is this a friend or is this a foe? Do I like this? Do I not like it? And so by actually relaxing into things, we find that life can actually be more attractive, and we can be attracted to the depth of ourselves, or attracted to what life has to offer. Terrific for you, Don.
I'm just gonna add something to that.
Yeah, absolutely, Phil.
I think what Don is talking about is his interest in the Stephen Porges's polyvagal theory, and so that there is a dorsal and a ventral component to the vagus nerve. And as Alan has talked about, this whole sort of fight or flight component, or do we freeze, or do we do that? So, and I think that's what Dawn is talking about. And thanks for mentioning that, Dawn. And just to make one other comment before we go on to the next question, the Mahasi Seidel technique has been very interesting. And he was the Burmese monk who brought this sort of dry insight. And he was very much into the constant monitoring of one's experience, moment to moment to moment, to an unbelievable degree that frankly is probably beyond the capacity of most of us to do on a regular basis. But I think that I think we need to act in a way that protects our mind from reactivity. And I have a little practice that I do that addresses or sort of leads to Len's comment about the music and Alan's comment about smell the roses. Because so often, I mean, how many people notice the color of the leaves that change, or the clouds in the sky, or the wind that's blowing? We habituate so quickly, we become accustomed to what we experience, that we need more and more enticing stimuli to bring awareness. And so what I try and do is I try and do what Alan says. And my comment is, when I'm out and walking and suddenly look up at the sky, my comment to myself is awe. A-W-E. And that reminds me not to simply gloss over what is present, but can I feel and see and experience the awe in the moment? So let's go on to the last one, or the next one, that is, Alan. You want to read it out to us? This is Christina's.
I started mindfulness about a year ago on the advice of my therapist to help heal anxiety from trauma. I do see changes in my self-compassion. I'm wondering, is there an optimal time of the day and or length of time in the day to meditate?
So I think the answer to this question is that it is a very personal choice. For me, the best time of the day to meditate is the morning. And the reason why is that I've had less time in the morning for my mind to be stimulated all day long. That there is still a sense of restfulness in the morning, that I'm awake in the morning. How many times do you say, you know what, I'm going to work out when I get home tonight after work? And do you ever end up going to the gym? No, because you get home, you're so tired, you're so hungry, and then after you eat, you don't want to do a thing. So it's a personal experience. For some, meditating at night helps with their sleep. But I find, for me, I get up in the morning, I shower, and even before I eat, I start my meditation. I think that when you begin meditating, let's be realistic. You're not going to meditate for an hour. That's fraught for failure. And what I do is I have my phone timer. I use Insight Timer as an app. And it's a free app without all the other add-ons. And it's a great way to simply set how long you want to meditate. And then it'll keep a record. Or for that matter, all you need to do is set the timer on your phone. I think it's wise to start with a meditation that might be just 5 minutes. And then do that for a week. And again, gauge your response by how you feel. Can I go to 10 minutes the next week, 15, 20, 25, 30, or more? Is more better? Probably yes. And certainly long retreats are a great opportunity to really consistently deepen one's practice. So I think morning is the best. Use a timer to set what you're going to do. Choose a space in your house that allows you privacy. It doesn't have to be a separate room. Previously, when I was in where I lived, I used to meditate in my bedroom. I had my cushion, and that's where I sat. Now I have the luxury of having a dedicated meditating room. It's irrelevant. What's relevant is that your family knows that this is your time to meditate and your time for privacy. Shut the door. Leave your phone in another room. Or if you're using it as a timer, don't answer your phone. Turn off that phone capacity. Do it. And just sit. And recognize that when you meditate, your meditations are not going to be like this. Oh, I had a great meditation today. And then tomorrow, oh my God, that was terrible. Today? And so hopefully it's like this. But the trend is upwards. And really what supports the trend more than anything else, consistency of practice. That it's probably better to meditate 5 minutes every day than it is to meditate an hour on Saturday. And one of the biggest problems we have is that when we need meditation the most, when we're more anxious, stressed out, agitated, are the times we don't meditate. And the reality is, those are the times we need to meditate.
We have another couple of comments and questions, Phil. Lena's asking your personal thoughts on meditation short videos, another personal choice, I guess.
I think that, we're so lucky we live in an era of availability of so many resources. And that there are a lot of apps out there like Headspace, like Calm, like 10% Happier that can be helpful for some who meditate. But there are a lot of wonderful teachers who freely offer guided meditation. If you go to the WTM website and go under resources, you will see that there is a list of teachers that offer valuable, free, effective teachings. And in particular, Joseph Goldstein, Jack Kornfield, Tara Brock, Gil Fronsdale, Shyla Catherine. There are multiple ones. And so guided meditations are very helpful in the beginning. But I think it's important that ultimately one needs to take the training wheels off when one feels more confident and comfortable with the practice, and let that go. But make use of all the wonderful assets. And I tell you, we have some wonderful videos on the WTM website and on the breathproject.org website that can be of value for you.
Wonderful. I'm being respectful of time. As I mentioned, we were happy to stay on. In terms of the relaxation, Heather, who I mentioned, is the speaker in 2 weeks' time. Heather is pleased welcoming everybody, as she'll talk some more about comments on the Vagal system, a nice lead into our sleep workshop in 2 weeks' time. So even if you don't have sleep issues, please join Heather. Don echoes something that we've said in a way here, and I'm going to link it to a comment from Hannah. Hannah says water meditation is quietly watching the movement of water at or near the shores of the Glenmore Reservoir, or a river, or a little pond. It changes depending on the depth of the water, especially the wind at the surface, etc. It's relaxing and satisfying. The reason why nature is very helpful, and of course a walk in nature, looking at the trees, listening to the wind, looking at the birds, the sounds Len spoke to, is again, we're getting into that experiential, non-conceptual thinking. And when the mind, the vagus system works by increasing relaxation, and then we also calm down. So of course, there are 100 different objects that we can then concentrate on We can concentrate using water or art or music or sound or silence or the breath. And so the principle Phil was using this evening about the breath is it's always available, everybody's got it. But of course, people can choose as their focused, concentrated practice anything. You can, an image of God, you can visualize a beach, you can visualize a sound, you can have a gong, whatever. It's less important what the thing is. And as Phil said, to individualize it, which leads into Don's comment, which is, and Don has a wonderful energy. Don writes, experimentation and adventurism breeds an excitement for life without the adrenaline addition, which dysregulates me into sympathetic activation. So there's this line between becoming activated in an unhealthy, unwise way that Phil spoke about, which can lead to addictions. But there's also this sense of coming alive that Don speaks about here. And he says, my self-agency comes with doing the research and exploring for myself. Thanks, it was great for giving myself permission to grow. And would you like to say a word on permission, Phil?
Yeah, I'll just make one last comment, and then I think we'll wrap it up.
Yep.
I think the interesting aspect, and I just want to focus on this word that Dawn talks about, is sympathetic activation. We have accessible to us the most effective, practical tool for stress relaxation, and that is the breath. Because when your sympathetic system activates you, it's the fight or flight, it's the inhalation of the breath. The parasympathetic system is the relaxation response. It is the exhalation of your breath. And I think that the simplest, most effective strategy that we all can do whenever we are suddenly caught by our minds, by our stress, by our anxiety, is to simply bring your awareness to your breath. Count your breath as you breathe in. Breathe out for at least 1 second longer than you breathe in. And if it's possible, breathe in a ratio of 1 to 2. In other words, you breathe out twice as long as you breathe in. And do that for 3 breaths, 5 breaths, 10 breaths, until you settle. And I think if you're going to bring anything else away from this evening, other than meditation is important, find what works best for you. Nothing is fixed. Start with focused awareness and then experiment. That using your breath whenever you're agitated is the best thing you can do to settle. So I'd like to thank everybody who has joined us tonight. I'd like to thank Alan for, as usual, his wonderful moderating. And I will let Alan close the evening off.
Moment of silence is wonderful, Phil. As always, thank you so much, Phil. As many times as I hear these different aspects, and I've heard you talk about these before, and bringing them all together in one talk this evening as you have, and covering that range. And all the comments, I think the discussion this evening was very valuable to really broaden those aspects, to talk about permission, it's an adventure, to personalize it. And I want to thank everybody for participating this evening. Please join us. Without the community and participants, invite your friends if they've never been. If you know people who have been before and they're not showing up, just say, hey, come join me, go to their home, hang out together, join online. We're going to be reviewing again at some point in the next few months whether or not the possibilities, the options for meeting in person again. We're about to enter flu season. The COVID virus hasn't gone away. There's still many hundreds of people hospitalized in this province. So as much as we would love to be in person again, we're walking that sensitive ground in the middle, trying to optimize things. So we hope to meet everyone. Thank you again. Join us in a couple of weeks' time. Great couple of talks coming up. And thank you again, and do what works for you. There's no one right way, but there are many paths to the truth you might be seeking about what works for you. So thank you, everyone. Thank you, Phil. A pleasure once again. Take care, everybody. Good night.